Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. And for regular listeners of the show, you know this. I always place a tremendous amount of attention on leadership in coastal Mississippi. We can never have enough leaders. There are so many gaps to fill, so much work to do to make ourselves a resilient community. And I think one of the reasons why, after very tough challenges, whether it be things like an oil spill or Hurricane Katrina, that we're able to bounce back quicker is that we've got a lot of people engaged in the trenches who are terrific leaders. It's one of the reasons why, when I was publisher of the Sun Herald, we started what are now the One Coast Awards to recognize young leaders in coastal Mississippi as well as community leaders. And I'm thrilled that this continues. And so, again, for regular listeners, you know this. Each year when the One Coast Awards are presented, I work really hard. Cammie, our producer, Kyle, and I work really hard to bring as much attention to each of the winners as we possibly can. So we had a special show with Adele recently and have begun to sort of pluck off each and every one of them to tell their story. So that's what this next part of the show is about. And in fact, I have to tell you, I wish that I had set aside an entire show for Kelsey Keel, who we're going to be talking to now. She has a PhD, and she's the executive director of Let's Go Gulf Coast, a fund of the Gulf Coast Community Foundation, an organization I've supported for a bunch of years. But we're going to tell her story. So, Kelsey, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here with you.
Well, congratulations, incidentally.
Thank you.
So what I used to tell people when I had the pleasure, the honor of calling them to say that you have won the award, haven't had the opportunity to do that in a number of years, but what I used to say is this, that thank you for, first of all, congratulations, but thank you for letting us hold you up as an example for others, because at the end of the day, what we want people to do to be inspired by your story, people who are not where you are yet in terms of your level of participation to filling gaps that I spoke of, and that they can learn from you. They can say, okay, I want to be like Kelsey. I want to take a track that gives me the opportunity to be recognized for the leadership that I bring. But, I went back and studied your story and the work that you're doing now. We'll tell people more about that here quickly. But what's interesting is that you're not the kind of person who's seeking attention. You're very motivated by getting things done, aren't you?
Yeah, I would say I don't necessarily like or love all the attention on me, which is kind of funny as I'm the face of our organization. And we talk about this with our board of directors pretty regularly. It's more important for me to get the work done. We do work out in the community to help people. And I think maybe that's part of being a leader. It should never really be about yourself, but inspiring others and those you're around and kind of empowering them. I guess it is nice to get the recognition. I mean, I felt so honored at the One Coast Awards. I did feel so honored. I mean, it was a lovely morning. It was a great breakfast. Getting to meet, I knew a lot of people there, but seeing some new faces and getting to hear their stories and kind of their work and connect on that level is great. But yeah, it shouldn't really always be about you, but the work you're doing and the legacy you're trying to leave, I guess.
Yeah, what's been interesting, and we're going to we'll talk a little bit about Let's Go Gulf Coast, but we'll circle back and talk more about it in a future show. But in a nutshell, how do you tell people about this hard work that you've been involved in for a while now, as it really begins to, the rubber's hitting the road now? So tell us about this effort.
Yeah, so I'm the executive director of Let's Go Gulf Coast. We're the only nonprofit on the Mississippi Gulf Coast dedicated solely to combating childhood obesity. And it really is kind of a team effort. We are a coalition. We were founded almost 10 years ago now by individuals and businesses from the public and private sector. So 10 years ago, Singing River, Chevron, individuals from Blossom and Gas, the YMCA, all walks of life kind of came together through networking that they knew, and they said, hey, we need to address childhood obesity. And instead of everyone doing individual things, like a program at the Y or Chevron trying to invest money into a small program, they all really decided, the best way to tackle this big public health issue is to all come together and pool their resources. And that's how we were founded. I was hired shortly after, and I've stayed in this role. I love it. I love the Gulf Coast. I love our communities. We are in it for the long haul, trying to impact something like childhood obesity. We don't see progress in 5 years. In 10 years, we're starting to see things, trying to move that needle it is a very slow process trying to change some social norms. But the work that we're doing is so valuable and important in getting to go out in the community and work with schools and after school programs and do employee worksite wellness, and then revisiting those sites, after a couple weeks or a couple months, and hearing individual stories from people that we've worked with. That's what really kind of keeps us going. And we know we are making a difference. There's such a high demand for our programs. Everything we do is free. So yes.
Yeah, that's an exciting effort. I'm not surprised. You mentioned several collaborating organizations, including Singer River and Chevron and YMCA and others. I'm not surprised to hear that either, because this is a trend from these organizations to be involved in helping to solve community challenges. It's incredible what they do. But listen, Kelsey, let's take a step back for a second. You grew up in northern New York. You went to Rochester for school, but let's take a step even further back than that. Where did some of your desire to want to make a difference come from? Was this what you did in school, or did it come from your parents, or where did this come from?
Geez, that's a great question. I guess I've always been pretty driven. I guess a little crazy. Some may say type A. I'm not really sure where it comes from. I guess I'm the oldest of two siblings, so I had a younger brother growing up that I guess I always, tried to take care of and wanted to pave a good path for. I grew up in upstate New York, just on the Canadian border, south of Montreal, so very rural, very small town. I went to school. Some of my friends and colleagues here laughed. My elementary, middle, high school, we had like about 600 kids, K through 12. So our graduating class was small, but I always knew, I guess I wanted to go on and do more. My parents traveled with us when we were younger. So being able to see different places and different things. Neither of my parents went to college either. So I was a first generation college student. And that was really important to me. And, they always instilled how important it was to get an education. Those weren't opportunities that they had. So I guess they really pushed us growing up. And then I always loved to learn. I played sports. I did other things like honor society and Spanish club. I was always involved in school. I was a big skier and skater. We were in the Arctic, basically. It was very cold, long winters. So those types of outdoor things. But yeah, I was always involved. I liked working with others, and I always just loved learning. In school, outside of school, learning new things. I guess that was always really important to me, and that kind of started me on my journey.
Well, it's interesting. You just mentioned the Arctic, which is interesting to me. And then before we started the show, you mentioned Africa. So you have really worked hard to gain a global perspective about things, haven't you?
Yeah, I think, and I don't, I guess trying to do a little self-reflecting, I'm not really sure where it all started from. I guess somewhere in my childhood, or, nature versus nurture, maybe I was just like this. But I did my undergrad at St. John Fisher University in Rochester, New York. And talking about a question you asked me real quick before the show was, did I ever think I was going to be here, in my job now? And no, just life, and you have to kind of go with it. And I think that's important for other people to know too, especially younger generation. You can have a great plan, and then you have to be open to those changes. I started going to school in undergrad. I thought I was going to be a pharmacist. That is what I wanted to do. And then my freshman year, I got a job in a pharmacy. And, after 9 months, I loved my job as a pharmacy tech, but I knew that wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. But I kept that job for over 4 years, all throughout college. And then during my time in college, you're trying to explore new things. I was a biochem major. I loved science. But then I knew I didn't want to go to med school, and I didn't want to be a nurse. It's hard to kind of find those avenues. And I guess for younger listeners and viewers, or really anyone, it's hard. I feel like people think about jobs in very specific ways, or you have these set tracks. And I was really stressed knowing I didn't want to do these things, but I also think it's really important knowing what you don't want to do. So during college, I think it was my senior year, I had enough credits. I took time off, and I did an internship in Botswana, which is a country in Southern Africa, and I focused on public health. I just had one professor, and they mentioned public health, kind of this broader term, and epidemiology. And it was science-based, but it wasn't med school, it wasn't nursing, it wasn't physical therapy or pharmacy. So I was like, all right, well, let's try that. And I packed my bags and I went to Botswana, and I was there for like 7 or 8 months, and I worked. I took a class or two at their university, but I really worked with their Ministry of Health through an internship, and that was great. And just kind of opened my eyes. I think it's good to push yourself and try new things and go new places, because it was there that I learned there's this whole other aspect of healthcare that at the time I felt like no one talked about. Like, I didn't know that these were options. I didn't know that you could work in a lab with doctors and do research. I didn't know.
Listen, what a great story. It's so interesting to hear the paths that people take to brings them ultimately to coastal Mississippi. We'll pick it up right there at Southern Africa. How did that path, this is an interesting story. We have Kelsey Keel, who is a One Coast Award recipient and also the director of Let's Go Gulf Coast. We'll continue the conversation right after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. We have Kelsey Keel with us today, and we were just talking about her journey, being raised in northern New York, right on the Canadian line, going to a college I started to say Syracuse, but Rochester. That's what you said. And then eventually you kind of figured out from your job there what you didn't want to do. And listen, if I describe me, that's exactly the same thing. I found out early in my life what I didn't want to do. And then, here's what I said. I was never in one job for more than 2 years before I got a different job, and usually inside the same company. I don't know that I ever literally went on a job interview until I left the Sun Herald in 2009 to be CEO to this big company. But I just did the best I can and just let the chips fall where they may, and if there were avenues that were opened up along the way, I took them. It sounds like that's what Africa was for you. And this just opened up enormous opportunity for you to think about, now, what am I going to do next?
Yeah, I mean, while I was there, like I was saying, I was working with the Ministry of Health. I got to work in all different types of clinics, like a maternal child care clinic. I got to go out into very rural settings and help with just like emergent care needs. I worked, I did HIV research. I worked in a bunch of HIV clinics. I did some stuff with MDR TB. So just learning that there's all these different aspects of healthcare, that also, not to like bash school, but there's some things that you can't learn in a classroom, that you have to learn being out, or some things that aren't taught. There's so much value in that, pushing yourself, and just, there's all the, like you were saying, these different avenues and being open to them. So while I was there, just kind of seeing, you can work in healthcare and you can have an impact on people's lives by not necessarily, being an MD. There's other paths. I came back, I finished my bachelor's, and then I realized that I wanted to continue that path. I wanted to study epidemiology, which, for people that don't know, that's the study of viruses and diseases. So I knew I wanted to be more of like a clinical research, not necessarily working with patients one-on-one like a doctor would or something like that. So I looked at different master's programs, and I settled on Tulane. Ironically, I chose Tulane. I had it narrowed down to 3, but after Katrina, the year after, I came down on like a service trip, and we helped gut houses, and not even rebuild. It was just kind of like gutting and helping out. So I did that for like 10 days. So I had been to New Orleans twice on 2 different service trips. And I was like, you know what? I liked it there. I'm going to try that. I'm going to go to Tulane. So I did my master's in epidemiology at Tulane. And just, again, kind of keeping open mind and seeing where life goes. Well, when I was there, I guess this is kind of circles back to how I ended up in the position I am. But when I was in my master's program, I met my now husband, who was in dental school at UMMC in Jackson. Like, we met through friends. And so when I finished my master's, I was actually offered a job to head up a research study at UMMC in Jackson. So I guess that was a sign from above. So I took that job, and I worked at UMMC, and I was closer to my now husband. We're in the same city. And then when he finished his schooling, he's born and raised in Pass Christian, and he knew he wanted to come back his family has a family practice. And I was like, all right, let's try that. So I left UMMC and I came to the coast, and we moved to the pass. And I was nervous at first because, I was no longer like affiliated with a hospital. I really didn't know what I was going to do at that point for a job. But I loved Pass Christian. I was nervous about you're always nervous about moving. But we were here just like a month or so, and some new friends reached out, and I heard about this job posting for this childhood obesity initiative that all these organizations wanted to start. And I went and I interviewed, and I was, again, nervous. We joke about it now. This is more of a community health capacity, in education and trying to change norms in a whole community along the coast. And at that point, I had just been more clinically focused doing research. So I was like, a lot of those same tools in education transfer over, but it is different. But I interviewed and I went through and I got this job, and it was a little scary at first because I remember meeting with some representatives from Singing River and Chevron. And at that point, they were like, we want to combat childhood obesity. We think we want to use this messaging, and here you go. And I started, I tried to do all the research, and it took time, but we built up all of our programs, our theoretical model, and I got to know the community members. I had to go out and, meet people, work with schools and after school programs and network. But within a couple of years, I knew, all right, I love this. I see the impact we can have on the coast. And I guess I decided at some point I was crazy enough to go back to Tulane and get my PhD. I switched gears, because I'm clearly not doing clinical research anymore. So more community health capacity. And I got my PhD in social, behavioral, and population health. So kind of focusing more on a large population, why people do the things they do, how you can educate them, try to inspire change and things like that.
That's such a great story. It really is. And it was great hearing sort of your path to this position. Congratulations on your top 10 under 40 award. And what we're going to do next, in the next couple of weeks, we'll have you back on, and we're going to really drill down on this effort, Let's Go Gulf Coast, because there's so much to talk about. In fact, we'll spend a whole show talking about it because there's so much to talk about. But until then, it's been a great pleasure to get to know you better.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was an honor.
This has been Kelsey Keel. She's the executive director for Let's Go Gulf Coast and also a recent One Coast recipient. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.